video game characters with the best backstory. We all know that to write a great protagonist, the backstory and conclusion must be on point. Basically, the whole arc he undergoes, or she undergoes, but instead focusing on that whole arc, today I just want to focus on how much the backstory impacts a character's growth in their journey, and how prevalent it is in their decisions. Because all of these protagonists have similarities and differences amongst them. So we're gonna rank them only on the quality of what you get to know about their past, about their lore, which guide their very actions throughout their journey. Now don't get me wrong, I think it's gonna be a heck of a lot controversial, okay? It's gonna be controversial as hell. And I'll be really happy to hear your personal thoughts in the comments down below. So without further ado, let's get started. Kratos. Kratos has possibly the most iconic backstory in video game history. He's the ultimate Greek tragedy. Becoming a legendary Spartan general known for his valor on the battlefield, he is relentless and comes into battle with a Persian horde he cannot defeat. Calling out to the god of war because of his lust for power, Ares penetrated the sky and made Kratos his personal lapdog, playing him like a fiddle. And in his bid to make him the perfect warrior, Ares makes Kratos murder his wife and daughter. I mean, carrying the literal ashes of your family on your skin is the most metal and depressing visual metaphor I have come across in gaming. He even bears that iconic red tattoo because his brother was kidnapped by Ares as well. The thing with Kratos is that as each game progresses, layer upon layer of complexity, depth and emotional weight is added to his backstory, enriching it further and further. I mean, think about it. We're given the context that he's been in service of the gods for 10 years because of his sins. But little did we know that why he bared the red tattoo, because with Ghost of Sparta came that context too. And how he tried to challenge fate itself time and again, even in God of War Ascension, which was way before God of War 1. Okay? Even Sons of Sparta, which just released, adds so much more to Kratos' backstory, both as a brother and a father. So, Kratos already has a crazy backstory, and given much more emotional depth that he had in the Norse games, when we actually see him confronting his backstory and letting go of his past, we see that he's just too goated. Just to put you in the shoes of Kratos, you murdered your daughter and wife, carried that burden for thousands of years, along with a history of blood and violence, and you settle down and are thrust upon to bear the same responsibility you once messed up. By the time God of War Valhalla finished, Kratos' therapist even unpacked all of this for us throughout the game. So having come full circle by the end of that DLC, and having so many alludes to it, and so many additions layer upon layer, literally the backstory being present on his very own flesh, Kratos hits way too hard. Okay, it's not even a debate for me. Arkham Batman. I mean, it's Batman. What do I even say? Pretty much everyone knows about the small rich kid who watched his parents being gunned down in an alleyway, becoming the most badass crime-fighting vigilante in fiction, dressed like a bat. It's one of the most iconic in fiction. But that's the thing. Just because it's iconic does not mean it hits the same way it does from the others on this list. For me, Batman's backstory literally took a step back, the more and more I've watched all of his movies, his shows and played his games. The Arkham games, especially Origins and Knight, do a good job at presenting Batman's backstory, but compared to some of the characters on this list, we do not see it actively unraveling before himself, okay, and totally controlling him. Batman is in control of himself, and even though it's a straightforward backstory, it's just not as unique as some of the others on this list. And let's be honest, I was much more focused on the present and the future rather than Batman's past in the Arkham games. I mean, all I wanted to know in the games was how the hell is Batman going to get himself out of this one, be it the asylum or Gotham being gassed up. His backstory is legendary, just not visceral, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean I won't acknowledge it. He goes up in pretty solid, okay? He goes up in pretty solid. Geralt of Rivia. Geralt of Rivia is my favorite character in all of fiction. And there's a lot of reasons for that, including his backstory. An orphan left on the road by his parents and forced to go to a faraway keep to be relentlessly trained and agonizingly transformed into a professional mutated monster slayer. Hell, we even get to know the mages liked him so much they performed even further experimentations on him, which made him get the iconic white hair and the pale skin, along with the rest of his superhuman abilities. So, like Kratos, Geralt is carrying his own backstory on his flesh, and he's a very interesting and subtle character. Even though I'm focusing purely on the games right now, and not the books, even in the games, especially in Witcher 3, we get to know so much of Geralt's past and how it helps shape his perspective. Witcher 3 has got such a diverse story with multiple branches and countless scenarios and interactions. Whenever I interacted with a villager or a soldier or a guard, and in many scenes, we see the burden of his mutation being spit upon by the eyes of the society, who see him as an outcast and a mutant. And whenever I have to make certain decisions, like for example, there's this quest known as the Shrieker, you have to hunt down a basilisk, and you have the option to either take the money or let the poor villager keep it for the victim's kid. If you choose the latter, you'll get my point.
The coin. You took in an orphan. Need it more than I do.
And they call witches unfeeling, inhuman. Well, I thank ye.
Every decision leads back to the same status quo, that Witcher mutations strip them completely of their humanity, and for some Witchers in the game, maybe that's the case, but not Geralt. He's much more emotional than most of real life normal humans. In the Kaer Morhen arc of the game, if you explore, which let's be honest, you will be compelled to because it's beautiful as hell. You learn so much of Geralt's past by visiting known places like the Bastion and the Watchtower, even in the main quest with Lambert. But the thing is, Geralt's own journey within the game itself hits so much more than his own backstory. His relationship with Yen and Ciri takes all of his focus and our focus as well. And we can feel that as the player, which is why I have decided I'm going to put him in Hard to Ignore. Jin Sakai. Now, I have always liked the way of the samurai. They are the epitome and paragon of discipline and warriorhood, and most of all, honor. Having all of that into context, Jin Sakai, a man raised by one of Japan's most influential warriors, witnessing his own father die in front of him, an act of cowardice as seen within the game, as he was begging for help, and Jin himself was not in a position to do that. Burdened by that guilt and that code of honor thrust upon him, Jin comes into conflict as to what he's supposed to do and what he's compelled to do. The Mongols couldn't be defeated by the way of the samurai, only by the way of the shinobi. And as we see Jin progress from the former to the latter, you see with each mission he's losing a part of his past, his upbringing. Every time I hid and performed a stealth kill in GOT, I really felt that I made a mistake that I cannot revert. But the thing is that Jin Sakai's backstory is a conflict of duty, not that of the soul. Jin is a victim of upbringing, sure, but he's a soldier with a clear mission. His backstory gives him a choice, honor or survival, but it's also shown that he's much more than his past. He does not lack an absolute point of no return, for he knows his actions helped save a lot of lives, including the whole of Tsushima, and we know that there are people who hate him, but also people who revere him, who worship him. And so he lets his actions get driven by the needs of the present and the future, rather than the ways of the past. For that, I'm going to place Jin in Too Hard to Ignore. He's not quite at the topmost level in my opinion, but he is in striking distance, okay? So I'm just going to put him... Yeah, I just find Geralt's backstory a bit more interesting. I'm going to put him just besides Geralt. Yeah. Joel Miller. Mr. Miller is interesting because basically the first 15 minutes of the game is his backstory, yet it carries the weight of the next tens of hours of playtime. If you want a backstory that fundamentally breaks a character's moral compass, this is it. After Sarah's death, Joel is basically a pod being navigated on autopilot for the next couple of decades, just a hollow survivor. And then Ellie comes into play. Joel doesn't even like Ellie at first. Hell, he literally at one point says that he isn't his daughter at all and he sure as hell is not her dad. But then, throughout the game, especially after the point Tess dies, RIP, their bond becomes unbreakable. And you see these little moments of Ellie and Joel just interacting and having fun with each other, like the porn magazine one or when he pushed her off in the water. Also the big moments where they take turns protecting the other with their lives. And then he makes the most controversial choice in gaming history when he rescues Ellie from the Fireflies. I mean, there you have the literal cure of the apocalypse that can help save a lot of lives and can end this nightmare once and for all, but Joel's paternal instincts kicked in and he refused to allow Ellie to die. The reason why Joel's backstory hits so hard is this only, and how this decision can be viewed logically upon from both sides of the coin. On one hand, the practical one, that Ellie can help save humanity, but die in the process, and on the other, the emotional one, where he doesn't want his newfound daughter to be taken away just like the first one was. Joel would spend the next game coming to terms with this catastrophic decision, based entirely on his backstory and past, and dying in the process. Screw you, Naughty Dog, by the way. Why do you have to do Joel like that? Point is, my guy chose the life of one girl over the entire human race because of his past. It's very simple on paper, but the consequences of the backstory are just too huge, okay? It's a controversial take, maybe not a controversial one, but I really think Joel deserves to go in the top tier, okay? I'm putting him at hits way too hard. Just besides Kratos. He's literally at a point of no return after that act. Arthur Morgan. Boy oh boy, this is gonna be a heavy one. Please, Arthur fanboys, spare me in the comment section because I'm going to be putting him on too hard to ignore. Okay, I'm going to be putting him at the top of the tier. Now before you crucify me, hear me out. Arthur Morgan is arguably the most well-written protagonist in gaming. Arguably, okay? For some people. Okay, you'll hear very few arguments from me about that. Okay? An orphan who was picked up by a revolutionary outlaw who educated him in the ways of killing, robbery, and many other facets of human life, slowly becoming part of a family he once never had. But his whole perspective comes crashing down when he witnesses his own father figure for what he truly is. Arthur is all about internal conflict and misplaced loyalty. Initially, he comes across as cold to the outside world, the world apart from his family, his companions, but then as the game progresses, Arthur breaks those same walls down and becomes kinder to the outside world. He knows he's an irredeemable guy. He's killed so many people, but that really does not mean that he cannot do good in his life. If you choose the high honor path, you'll see the other characters in the game recognize him as a good man, but Arthur himself deep down knows he's making up for all the damage he's caused to many people in his life. The thing of which, why I wouldn't put Arthur in the top tier is because he didn't spend much time in the shadow of his backstory and past. He outgrew it. The long winding road led him exactly where he needed to be and find his redemption. It's a beautiful arc, but if you can catch my meaning, Arthur's backstory feels more like a setting than a loop, if you get it. Arthur was no longer burdened by the weight of his past. His journey throughout the game itself was enough to make even the toughest of people cry their eyes out. Arthur Morgan was all about the journey, then the start, and characters such as Kratos and Joel, they are not like that, in my opinion. They are imprisoned, shackled to live in the shadow of their own decisions, their past, their backstory for the rest of their lives. Kratos just got out after spending 1,000 years like that. My guy got a break after shit tons of games and lore and progression. It's just two different perspectives, and personally for me, the backstory itself was the focus in my mind for Kratos and Joel, whereas for Arthur, it was all of it, from start to finish, which is why I ranked him in too hard to ignore. Solid Snake. Now Solid Snake is a solid character. See what I did there? See what I did there? Okay. If you take a look at his backstory, it's pretty great. He's part of the L'Enfant Terrible program. But it was a program which was made to clone the world's greatest ever soldier, Big Boss. And from Big Boss spawned 3 new kids, one of which was David, aka Solid Snake. When you play the games, you are told that he was genetically inferior to his siblings and his own father. Yet he came out on top, whatever challenge was put in front of him. The problem I have with Solid Snake is it literally blew my brains trying to piece together his entire story and backstory. Hell, that's the problem with Metal Gear, man. That They have huge dumpings of lore and backstory, and it fried my brain, and I honestly had to piece it all together using a wiki. And I totally refuse to believe that I'm the only one who got confused, okay? I'm pretty sure a bunch of you got confused as well. Metal Gear's story as a whole, in my opinion, is much more focused on Big Boss than Solid Snake personally for me, having played some of the games in the series. Big Boss has an even more solid backstory than his son, but that's for another video. Point is, the stories in Metal Gear are so easily to get lost into with all the comparisons, the conspiracies, the cheesy lines, and the explanations. And in my mind, it is not a great presentation of context for any character. But as I played Metal Gear Solid 4 and 5, I got to know much more about Solid Snake's backstory. And even though it's marred by all the bloody lore dumping, it's still pretty solid. Solid Snake, you go right beside Batman. Dante. Now, Dante is one of my favorite video game characters, primarily because of his style and goofy attitude, and his overall unmatched levels of badassery. Most of the games, I wasn't even focused upon his backstory, okay? I just wanted the next cool cutscene and some more bosses to beat stylishly. But that was because DMC4 was my first DMC game, and when I played the first one, it kind of intrigued me into the whole backstory of Dante. And as I played the first game, finished the first game, and then played DMC3, I was thoroughly hell-bent on finding all the bits of backstory information that I can on Dante, because I got to know a side of him that wasn't at all showcased in the games. We know Dante is the son of the legendary demon Sparda, who rebelled against his own kind and settled down with Eva, Dante's mother. Sparda disappears, and Eva fails to protect Virgil, Dante's twin brother, and protects Dante instead, but she gets killed soon after. We are literally shown this in DMC5, which adds so much more context than some of the previous entries in the franchise to Dante's past. But it's actually the manga and the novels of DMC that I read that I got to know about Dante's backstory. It's actually great. Okay, you guys have got to check it out. Dante is so good as a character. You'll get to know that from the manga and the novels. But anyways, Dante, when old enough, works as a mercenary under an alias known as Tony Redgrave, and in some of his jobs, things go wrong, and ultimately he decides to embrace his identity as Dante, the son of Sparda, and eventually comes to terms with his dad's deeds as well. But on the course of his journey, he lost so many people that it baffles me on how Dante can keep on a casual funny attitude on him and fighting on the human side. And we also get to know that most of the jobs Dante does, he doesn't get paid only because the money is spent in repairing the damage he causes in his fights. Now, only because of the fact that Devil May Cry games do not really emphasize storytelling at all. Let's be honest, most Capcom games do not. Which means that most of the gamers who play DMC might not know about Dante's full past. And they have no idea what he's been through. He goes in understated. No debate for me. Doomslayer. I've got nothing against the Doomslayer, okay? He's one of the most iconic characters in gaming. But writing is not his best department, man. It's not his best department. And I'm gonna be short about this. I really wasn't interested in the backstory when playing any Doom game at all. It was all about the action. And initially when I got to know the Slayer's lore, that his wife and daughter and pet rabbit died at the hands of demons, so he slaughters them for millennia, it was cool. But since it wasn't that unique as an idea, the presentation should have made up for that, right? And Doom does not care about that. Even the ancient Sentinel lore dumps we have are just not enough for me to, consider Slayer's backstory come into mind whenever I think of him. I know the latest entry, Doom the Dark Ages, provides much needed context for some of the questions that we had in Doom Eternal, but I just can't help but feel that Doom could have handled it better, okay? Doomslayer, whenever I look at you, your backstory doesn't come into mind. For me, it's all about the demon killing rampage you go on. James Sunderland. Finally, we've got James Sunderland. Arguably the best protagonist in all of gaming. Again, he has a solid case as well. I just completed Silent Hill 2. And I can say that it was an experience of a lifetime. And I mean that. There are very rare pieces of media, let alone video games, that can produce such a story and a protagonist like James Sunderland. He goes to the top and he has to stay there. Okay, he is the best. He goes right at the top. When you start the game, you'll think, oh, James, he's a damn depressed guy who misses his wife, who died 3 years ago and suddenly surfaces again. So yeah, why not go check it out? But damn, James is so much more complicated than that. And then the beauty of Silent Hill is shown when you realize that the town is actually playing on his trauma, his entire emotional state, caused by a mysterious backstory manifesting in brutally terrifying creatures like the Pyramid Head and the mannequins. They are his guilt and to some degree his sexual frustration. God, I love Maria. But anyways, when that scene plays, yes, that scene of James when he's watching a videotape revealing that it was actually him who killed his wife with a bloody pillow. The guy's entire backstory is basically the level design of the game and its core premise. And what it does brilliantly is that when it reveals that it was James who killed his wife, we can still understand him to a degree. Sure, it's damn wrong, okay? It's damn wrong to murder your family. But even though most of us will not do that, we still have experienced immense amounts of pressure, hopelessness, and depression. We can at least relate to those emotions, to those moments when there was literally no path left out for us to go towards, and yet one either pushes through it or succumbs to it. And unlike a proper cliche, James's vulnerability won over him. It's a very well thought out and exquisite backstory to a character you don't know what to do with, either to blame him or to defend his actions. But what the game does show is that James has the power to move on from his past, move on from his guilt and his regret and his backstory. The final scene with Mary and James broke me, okay? And it solidifies James's simple yet goated backstory as the top spot in this list. And finally, we have Ezio Auditore. Now let's talk about the Italian stallion, Ezio Auditore. Now on paper, Ezio's backstory is somewhat heard of, right? Rich, influential, wealthy kid who sees his parents murdered in front of him and turns into a life of shadows in the name of justice. Where have I heard that before, I wonder? But in particular to video games, in my opinion, Ezio has Batman beat. The relatability and scale of Ezio's backstory just hits different in the games compared to that of Bats in the Arkham ones, and I'll tell you why. The Ezio trilogy were my latest Assassin's Creed games, not gonna lie, and I platinumed each and every one of them, and I understand why they're so goated. But one thing I also recognized was the iconic soundtrack known as Ezio's Family. Imagine a backstory so simple, yet creating such a huge impact that it becomes the audio DNA of the entire franchise. Each and every game you play, you will hear its version of Ezio's Family in between its main theme. Be it AC Valhalla or AC Mirage or Unity, they all have their versions of Ezio's Family, one way or the other. And just because of that one constant reminder we get to that particular point of Ezio's backstory where we feel his loss in his journey, he has to carry the weight of his father's legacy. Ezio's tragedy was also the cause of the proper establishment of the Creed of Assassins within the game's lore. I mean, it legit states without Ezio, assassins were done. Okay, they were cooked. So, all I have to say is that his origin story has become a symphony that's been playing for decades. Okay, and if that's not enough, that a backstory sends ripples so huge across the franchise that you're undeniably the face of that franchise. Your origin story is undeniably the most iconic moment of that franchise. A franchise sprawling for decades. Now, you can use the same argument for Batman, but in my opinion, in video games, Ezio is superior to Batman. That's why I'm gonna place Ezio in Too Hard to Ignore. I'm gonna place him... Okay, this is the tough one, man. He either goes besides Jin... You know what? I'm gonna place him in the last position, in the Too Hard to Ignore tier, okay? Just because, you know, Batman and his backstory is too similar, but it's just different as well. I'm gonna place him at there. Anyways, this is my final ranking. So Please don't forget to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that. Let's try hitting at least 1,000 likes on this video. Okay, please guys, please, come on, let's do this. And I would really like to hear your placements in the comments. Okay, I would really love to hear which characters do you think belong in the highest tier and which characters belong in the middle one and the lowest ones. And if you really like this video, I would really appreciate if you would subscribe to the channel. Okay, this is the Devil Crow, and I'll see you later.